Hello, my name is Imara Jones, and I'm here at the Bioneers Conference as a special correspondent for FSTV to talk about how that movement, the Bioneers movement, can help heal ourselves, our nation, and our planet at this really critical time in history. There's no greater issue right now of that of climate change and environmental justice, and that's why we are thrilled to be joined today by Mariel Nanasi, who is the executive director of New Energy Economy in New Mexico, who is taking action against the fossil fuel industry and energy production companies to make our planet safer and more livable. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
You started out as a lawyer. You started as a lawyer working in the area of justice, but in terms of justice for people who were behind bars or imprisoned wrongly in the conditions in which they were imprisoned. But you mentioned that you came to Bioneers, which is where we are, and it changed your life and set you on the path that you're on now. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, in 2008, I was here, and it's true, I represented victims of police misconduct and abuse and wrongful imprisonment and even death in jail. And that was a very rewarding experience in my life. But when I was here, I was sitting in the audience and I understood or thought I understood about climate change, but I didn't really appreciate the urgency of it. And I thought, how am I going to look at my kids in their eyes and say that I knew about this, but I didn't use my talents to do everything I could to address it. And so I literally went home and I looked around and said, who's doing the best work in New Mexico around climate change? And that was New Energy Economy, the organization that I now lead. But I first became a volunteer. I worked really hard and started to learn about energy. And energy is a big field. But I knew nothing at that time. And I just knew that coal was the greatest driver of climate change, and that in New Mexico we have abundant solar and wind. And we have solar on our flag. I think it's the most beautiful flag in the United States. And but we only had at that time 1% solar. That's where we were getting our electricity from. Was 1% solar, 60% coal, 20% nuclear, about 10% gas, a little bit more, and about 7% wind. And I thought, we need to just like turn that completely on its head. We can and need a energy revolution in our society, and we need to power our homes and our TVs and everything with solar and wind, and eventually with battery storage, which I think we're really close to.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the key things I think about your work is that it's one thing to say that we need a revolution in energy production and that we need to change that. But one of the things that you're focused on is tackling the structural underpinnings of that industry, the way in which you take on regulatory biases that allow for fossil fuel industries to thrive by removing those people that are on those boards that are friendly to that industry, working on changing the laws, on demonstrating, on the full range of things. There's a mechanics of energy production that biases the fossil fuel industry that you tackle, which I think is really what's interesting and innovative about your work.
Thank you. Well, first of all, it's really important to understand how they make money. So the way that they make money is not only on the electricity that they generate, but on the assets that they own. So unfortunately, there's a perverse disincentive. So if they have an old coal plant and they have to put pollution controls, or like the one that one of the ones that I'm fighting is almost 50 years old. Well, when you have a 50-year-old something, including people, things start to break and things start to go wrong. But with the fossil fuel companies, and especially regulated monopolies, in New Mexico we have regulated monopolies. They are supposed to be regulated by what's called the Public Regulation Commission. And there are other entities, administrative agencies, Public Utility Commission, but they're not really regulated. on behalf of the public like they're supposed to. And so what's happened is there's this perverse built-in disincentive where they not only make money from the energy, as I said, and the assets, but they get this risk premium on assets. And in our states, it's 9.575%. So essentially 10%. So when they invest in old coal plants that need new pollution controls or that things that break, they get a 10% added bonus. So there's really no incentive for them to leave this old fossil fuel economy. As a matter of fact, there's a disincentive. And I will just tell you, I just won a case this week.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And what it was that P&M, Public Service Company of New Mexico, except I don't see that they really serve the public, is thinking, okay, we actually have to close coal because it's no longer economic. And there's just, the wave has gotten too strong. And so they're saying, okay, we're going to close coal in 5 years. That's their current plan. And so they said, we want 50 megawatts of solar in our new renewable portfolio plan. So most environmentalists said, solar, finally, you're going to invest in more solar? And I said, but who's going to own it? Who is it benefiting? And they were like, Mariel, just don't worry about that. They're adding more solar. It doesn't really matter. But I think it does matter. And so we fought them and said, you can't just own the solar too, which is what P&M's proposal was going to be about. You have to open up the market, and you can compete if you can win against other solar companies. Then you can have you own it. But if you can't, and other people can produce it for in a less costly way, then they get the bid. They win the bid. And with this 10% premium that I talked about, it's like a no-brainer that other solar companies that would create local jobs would win. And then we're not continuing the extractive model, which it's not only extracting the really bad extreme energy, uranium and coal from the ground and gas, but it's also an extractive paradigm. And so if we just supplant solar instead of coal, which I understand, we are running out of time and we need to really act quickly. But if we just do that, then we're not creating energy democracy. We are just replicating the same system that's caused injustice, and injustice for poor people and injustice for people of color. And that's really infected our society with harm. And the same underpinnings of that economic model that has gotten us to this place where we're on the precipice of a climate crisis. And we really are there. We're almost at a planet that's on hospice. And it's really important that we take action, collective action, to not only just replace solar with coal and nuclear, but change the system that created this problem.
Right. I want to turn to energy democracy, which you brought up, and to solar in a minute. But one of the things that makes it hard to transition to those is one of the things I learned in your presentation earlier today, in your introduction, that once upon a time, energy in this country, energy production, was actually owned by the government. It started out that way. And that costs were 40% lower than relative private companies, and that we decided to monopolize and allow monopolies to develop that were supposed to be regulated in the public interest, but they've actually just become a Wall Street subsidy. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because that's one of the obstacles that you ran into to moving to these new systems.
Yes, there are still 2,000, a little over 2,000 municipal utilities left in the United States. And you're right, not only are they less costly, But they also are have more solar and wind in their portfolio, but they're also more responsive to the people because generally those municipal utilities are very close to the people, right? Because they are owned. Austin Energy is one of them. It's I think it's won like the greenest award in the whole country year after year after year. But the thing that's so important is that there's access. And so this idea of energy democracy is that the local people get to infuse their principles and values into the energy choices because they have access. It's not like who's at P&M, like does anybody know except for me, who's making the decisions and how do we have access to them? And we don't. It's all mediated through the Public Regulation Commission, and when do they meet and how do you get involved? And there's all this bureaucratic morass and how do you, but with a municipal utility, especially like in Austin, you show up at city council and you bring all your neighbors and you say, hey, this investment in fossil fuels, that's not where we want to be. And in fact, what's so cool about municipal utilities, including Austin, is not only are energy prices lower and can they do really innovative things that is like about demand response and energy efficiency and things like that, but then the profits that the utility makes gets recycled back into the community and gets repurposed into the needs of the people. I think in Austin, approximately a quarter of their city budget comes from the energy that people use. So it's just repurposed back into their community instead of being extrapolated out of the community and sent to Wall Street for the few to make a lot of money.
So a part of energy democracy is localizing energy production so that people have more control over the type of energy that they receive, how they get it, and the prices at which they receive it. And a key part of that, of course, is solar, especially I would imagine in a place like New Mexico. You don't have to import energy from thousands of miles away from California or from Colorado, as is part of the grid works, to have solar a part of that. So can you talk a little bit about solar as a part of energy democracy?
Well, one of the things that we've done at New Energy Economy really pretty successfully is invested in local institutions that we see as sort of being anchored into the community. And so one of those groups are Native Americans, and so we've partnered with the Pueblo of Tesuque, and these are just, local Pueblos. And one of them was a nonprofit called Tewa Women United, and they serve 8 northern Pueblos, women from the 8 northern Pueblos, and the Española community. And so we invested in this community institution. They provide midwifery services and domestic violence services. And again, now that they don't have to pay electric bills because they are providing electricity on the roof of their building, they get to take money that was previously allocated for electricity. Like, that's just a cost of doing business, right? That's just a cost of doing the nonprofit work. But now they don't have to use that money for that. They can repurpose it into their own community needs. And so we've done that also with firefighters. So I'll tell you one quick story.
Yeah.
Because firefighters in New Mexico, like California, are literally on the front lines of climate, right? Because look at what's just happened in Sonoma and Santa Rosa and
right around here.
So, and firefighters are like often attractive looking people, and they help people out. They don't give you tickets like police. So we went to a Santa Fe County commissioner, and we said, what about you put in half of the money, and I'll go raise half the money for solarizing a local fire station. And of course we had to meet with the fire chief and a couple of the higher up fire people. And we met and they said, okay, yeah, we'll try it. I mean, they weren't like super excited about it, but they were like open, let's just put it that way. Anyway, we put solar on the building. The first month, they didn't pay a bill. The second month, they didn't pay a bill. The third month, they got a check from P&M for $11. That $11 check turned into the most significant policy change in the Santa Fe County Commission. And what they did was they voted, as a result of that $11, to solarize every fire station in Santa Fe County. Wow. And then we had a bill in the New Mexico State Legislature, and legislators are allowed to take some of their capital funding and allocate it to capital projects. And there was $182,000 that was allocated from Santa Fe legislators to the Santa Fe County fire station solarization projects. They've completed 5 of them now as a result of our initial $15,000 investment. And it is the only solar project that was not, that Governor Martinez, Republican Governor Susana Martinez, hasn't vetoed.
Wow.
Yeah, and so it was like a fantastic project from start to finish, and it continues on. And now the firefighters are like solar champions, and it's really great.
So if you had a solar magic wand for the entire country, and could implement one policy or one type of program that you think would really help to lead to a transformation, what would that be?
I kind of know that answer, and that is to solarize every single school in the United States.
Wow.
First of all, solar is a great match for schools because generally they're not open at night except for like your average PTA meeting or something. But kids have righteous voices. And if they saw and understood that their energy, which 99% of the kids in the United States of America have no idea where their energy comes from.
Most people don't.
Most people don't. And so whenever we do a solar project, we have a poster, let's say, but it's an outdoor-indoor poster, and it shows in graphic form and words, and of course we would do it in Spanish and as many languages as we need, to explain how solar works. We also have a computer monitor in real time that explains, that shows you how much solar is being actually produced in kilowatts, how much carbon is being offset,
wow,
how much water is being saved in real time in every single project that we do. So it would be a teaching moment, and kids, you know, they break your heart, right? So they'd be our best advocates, and they would learn. So that would be the number one thing I would do first. There's lots of other things, but one of the other thing that's incredibly important is to remove the fossil fuel subsidies, because there's still enormous subsidies for fossil fuels in the United States that, you know, one of the things that we've learned about is really, and this goes back to the question that you had of energy democracy, is that unfortunately the fossil fuel industry is the most powerful industry on the planet.
Yeah.
And in Congress,
it's the biggest industry on the planet.
It's the biggest industry on the planet, and is worth more than in the history of money. And so they have undermined our democracy. So it's about taking that back.
Right.
That's why we need kids.
Can you on that point, one of the things that the fossil fuel industry has gotten to be popularized is this notion that we have to do away with, quote, subsidies, unfair subsidies for solar and wind because it puts them at a competitive disadvantage. But as you've just said, they continue to receive subsidies. Can you talk about some of the subsidies that the fossil fuel industry continues to receive that they don't want to have talked about?
Yeah, I think that there's something like 7 lobbyists per each legislator in the U.S. Congress, but we see it in New Mexico a lot too because we're an energy colony. And really, I don't know the numbers, to be perfectly honest, about how much, but I think it's many billions of dollars per year.
Tax breaks, research
tax breaks, all sorts of things like that. Lots of loopholes, and it's really the lobbyists, which is like a whole industry in and of itself, that are pushing this. And these people are literally spokespeople for the industry.
When you say energy colony, you just said we're an energy colony. What is that? That's something I haven't heard before.
Well, in New Mexico particularly, again, about extractive industries. For instance, there's a lot of fracking in New Mexico, thousands and thousands of wells. Mostly happens in native areas. And this is a crime against humanity. And so what just to give you a little idea, there's fracking going on 24/7 right next to elementary schools. The asthma rates are staggering, 2.5 times that of other places in the United States. The water is contaminated. The wastewater is often just sort of dumped on the side of the road. It's not only the loudness of the actual fracking, but it's also the trucking. And I just want to describe something that I just saw the other day that was very disturbing. There was this oil tanker, and on the side of it, there was all these police officers pictured on the side of the tanker. And they're all in like very cool get out like ways, and black and white and Latino and Asian and like diverse cops pictured looking really cool and accessible and open. And it says something like, you know, thank you, law enforcement, for protecting us. And so really what's happened, and we saw it at Standing Rock, is this intertwining of, I mean, they're supposed to protect the people, not the oil companies. But unfortunately, law enforcement is so intertwined, and that's a really worrisome thing. And that's what we're seeing in the lobbyist situation as well. And so it's no wonder why there's no monitoring, and there's no real regulation, and people are suffering, and it's causing harm.
So I'd like to try to end the interview, unfortunately, to end it, because this is a great conversation, but to end it where we began it. And so can you talk a little bit about what you've learned is the link, or are the links, between environmental justice, racial justice, and criminal justice, because you've worked in all three?
It's a very big question that you just asked me. The overarching idea is that we have a throwaway society. So black and brown people have been thrown away into our jails and our prisons, and poor people. And that's the same in the energy industry. Even where I live in beautiful Santa Fe. We have the cleanest air, or one of the cleanest airs, they say, in the entire country. But 300 miles away, where our energy is produced, is on the Navajo Nation. There's more coal mining and burning on Navajo Nation, I think, in a concentrated way than anywhere else. And so what does that say? It says that, oh, those coal plants that spew these toxins, I mean, I couldn't even name all the toxins. Mercury, nitrogen oxide, sulfur dioxide, particulate matter. We are causing health problems that are staggering for the people, and so they're thrown away too. And that's why it's so important to understand what these links are. And it's easy to ignore in Santa Fe because you can have beautiful, and relatively our energy isn't that costly.
Right.
But it is costly in human health and what's happening to the environment, because we can't throw away people and sleep well at night. And we have to build a compassionate society that with different values. I don't think that we're happy we're not happy. That's why we have like drug overdoses like crazy. And I mean, I just read this New York Times article about the absolute increase of, drug use in this country. And it's like to forget all the problems that we're facing. Well, why don't we just stop doing all the harm and create a society where we care about people and they belong, and we don't just like have bad things happen and then we benefit for them and then not think about it.
Well, that is both a sobering and a hopeful note, because you've provided some ways in which we can stop being a disposable society, and start caring and connecting more. And so I just wanted to thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
And to just say, keep on keeping on.
Thank you. I really believe that we can, it looks a little scary out there, sometimes very scary out there. But I think that the answer is with connecting people with their human heart, but also working your ass off, which we do, because that's the best way forward. Activism is the antidote to despair.
Well, thank you so much for joining us again. And to find out more information about the New Energy Economy, go to newenergyeconomy.org, where you can connect to all of the campaigns that they are going and all of the support that they need to continue these groundbreaking campaigns, and to connect with them more directly. So thank you for joining us here on FSTV at our special Bioneers coverage, and we'll see you soon.